This afternoon, we have our third speaker from the panel. Please join me in welcoming Sarah Chambers, who's going to be talking about the struggle of the Chicago Teachers Union, part of that same fight against imperialism. Sarah Chambers is a special education teacher for Chicago Public Schools and is part of the Chicago Teachers Union. She authored an essay about the testing boycott entitled "More Than a Score: The New Uprising Against High-Stakes Testing." She's been a tireless advocate for social justice education and a relentless defender of her students from the embattled Chicago Mayor Rahm the Schoolyard Bully Emanuel. Please welcome Sarah Chambers.
All right, we're going to start with a teacher chant. All right, so when public education is under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back.
When public education is under attack, what do we do?
Stand up, fight back.
Whose schools?
Our schools.
Whose schools?
Our schools.
All right, you all know it. Okay, so good afternoon, you all. How are you all doing? You feeling good? Yeah. Are you all ready to revved up to fight neoliberalism and imperialism? Yeah. All right, well, here in Chicago, we are about the center of neoliberalism. All right, and we've been fighting it tooth and nail, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen around the news. So what does neoliberalism look like in education? It looks like disparities in funding, lack of funding, standardized testing to justify school closures, especially in black and brown communities, test scores and teachers' evaluations to fire experienced union teachers and especially teachers of color, mass school closures, privatization of our schools into charters, or they might be called academies in other countries. And let's just be clear, this isn't just happening in the United States. This is happening all around the world. Okay, so if you even look in the USA, Detroit and Philadelphia, 50% of their schools are now privately run. They're now charter schools. New Orleans, not a single public school left. 100% privatized schools, 100% charters. And they did this in the matter of a few years. A few years. Okay, so how has this looked in Chicago? In Chicago, we've had our older black teachers targeted through school closures, the evaluation system, and over just 10 years, we've lost half of our black teaching force. Half. We've had 50 school closures in 1 year in 90% black areas. We've had an explosion of charter schools. So now in Chicago, 19% of our schools are charter schools, are privately run, 19%, and it's looking about 20% soon. They've slashed our school budgets to the bare bones. So in schools like mine with 1,200 students, we have one nurse 2 days a week for students. So if we have students vomiting or students with lice, they're often just sent back to our classrooms. We have class sizes with 30 to 50 students even in kindergarten. For those of you who might have a 5-year-old, imagine having 50 of them in one room. 50. They'll take you over. All right? We have special education being demolished. Just this year, Rahm Emanuel, our mayor, cut special education by $85 million. We have 600 vacancies they have not filled, which makes out to about 20,000 students who aren't getting special education services. So we have some teachers who work with students with severe and profound disabilities, and they don't have enough assistance. So when there's a fire drill or a real fire, they have to choose who to save because they can't bring them all out. So I don't want to depress you all, okay? Neoliberalism is bad. We all know this. But over the past 6 or 8 years, we've organized a strong social justice movement by going after the neoliberal reformers and going after the 1%, because this is very tied together, as you all know. So this key to organizing a strong education movement is organizing side by side with parents, with students, with the communities, and especially with the oppressed people in our communities. So what we've done here in Chicago is we've joined forces with over 40 community organizations. We've had mass actions, mass rallies that have really prevented a lot of these attacks or at least slowed them down. So just to kind of talk about some of the actions we've organized. We've had mass rallies. We've had 2 strikes in 4 years. We almost had a last one, right? You probably heard. We just had that vote. And so we've been really organizing around that. We had one of our strikes was an illegal strike over progressive revenue and saying we want the millionaires' money, okay? And we had a strike over that last April. We've had bank occupations where I've also been arrested as well. I know so there's some pictures coming up. Bank occupations where we occupied Bank of America and said, Rahm Emanuel and Chicago Public Schools, you need to pay your schools before paying your banker friends. We've had testing boycotts where teachers and students from all over the city refuse to give the standardized test because it's a racist test that they're trying to use to close down our schools in black and brown neighborhoods and privatize them. We've had hunger strikes with over 19 parents and community members and teachers who didn't eat for 32 days because the last black school in their neighborhood was being closed, and they won. They won, y'all. They kept their school open. We've had school occupations. At my school last year, they tried to co-locate a school into my school, and we had parents and teachers and community members occupy the school overnight until they brought police in, threatening to drag us out, and we won. We stopped the co-location. And we've had rallies for CPAC, the Civilian Police Accountability Council, because we know as teachers, the ones who are being hurt and dragged off to the prisons are our students. And we see that school-to-prison pipeline. So that's why we support CPAC, because right now, almost every school has police officers, but they don't have counselors or social workers. And what you see with all these actions is you have protests in Chicago almost every week, every month. You can't go by without seeing protests against the mayor, against the 1%, against the racism. So let's just kind of talk about what have we won. Well, first of all, if we wouldn't have fought back, we would have looked like New Orleans. It only takes a few years to close the schools, to privatize them. We would have looked like New Orleans. And also now, we also have unionized charter schools. So now that they've opened these charters, we say, okay, well, we're going to unionize them because we know you're using this to union bust us. And one of our charters almost went on strike last week. First one, it would have been in history. All right, we've fought for progressive funding sources. We've won progressive funding sources and had mass movements around it. So you just hear in the streets daily people talking about how we need to take the millionaires' money, how we need financial transaction tax, and we need this funding to fund our social services. And now in all our schools, we have militant union members organizing the actions. It's not top-down. It's not just the unions telling our members what to do. The union members are organizing their own actions. And if you saw a couple of years ago with all this mass movement, we almost beat our mayor, Rahm Emanuel. We almost beat him. He barely won, okay? That's a huge win. And one of our teachers, we also won on city council. We've never had that before. Sue Garza on city council. All right, so these are all big wins, and what I want to say is without fighting back, our schools will look like New Orleans. Our cities will look demolished with social services cut. And organizing a militant union isn't just a question anymore. It's the only thing you can do to survive. Thank you. So I know we have a few minutes for questions. If anyone has any questions for me. And I know I didn't speak about the last contract as well, if anyone has questions about that. The last.
I can project. Can y'all hear me? Okay. All right. So, hello there, fellow educator. I am currently a preschool teacher and training to be an elementary school teacher in Kansas City, Missouri. There's a huge racial divide. We call it Troost. And I serve primarily children on or east of that divide. Is it working now? Oh, perfect. Okay. So, should I do the recap thing? Is this okay? Good or no? Okay, awesome. So my question to you is essentially, how do you keep, one, sanity, but two, how do you keep your career safe?
You got to make your boss more afraid of you.
Okay. Okay.
I'll be honest. My boss, as of last year, she told me straight up she would Google my name every morning. She was worried about what I was doing or what I would put in the news. And she was afraid because of the mass movement with the teachers and the parents that she knew if she did something wrong that we would take her down with us. Okay? That's one. And just in terms of teachers, if you don't have that connection with the parents and community, it is a lot easier to get rid of you. I know if they would go after us, our parents would be right at our side. They'd be, occupying the school or doing whatever not to save us. And in terms of sanity, I don't know, man. Don't got that much sanity. Try to sleep every once in a while. All right, other question.
Hi, I'm as a former student of CPS, I'm very concerned about CPS teachers in general and teachers all across the country. But I was wondering, how do teachers, and not just like the leaders of the teachers union, but teachers that, from school to school, how do they feel about the new tentative agreement that you guys got in the contract?
Okay. I'll be very honest. I voted no. One of the reasons I voted no, I think even within our own union, sometimes people underestimate their power. And you guys saw, we had over a 90% vote to strike. And although there are a lot of wins, especially around job security and the charter and closure moratorium, I thought we could have won more. We still haven't won anything around special education. We still haven't won clinicians or police out of our schools. And I know we are in austerity times, so it's always a risk going out on strike. But we're more powerful now than we were in 2012. We have way more community connections. There's way more protests. So I thought we actually could have fought more. It hasn't completely passed yet. The members have to vote on Thursday and Friday. But I think we could have won more. But one thing I will say, even if we accept this contract, the Board of Education they're going to break it, and we're probably going to have another strike within a year anyway. Because if they break our contract, we can strike. So there's that as well.
Hi. Hello. I'm from Washington, Seattle, and a couple years ago in 2009, we tried to pass a millionaire's tax. It actually started out really, supportive, overwhelmingly, and then it got basically killed through the CEOs of Starbucks, Microsoft, Amazon spoke out against it, and ads and money was pouring in. And the unions that were at the table or running part of the coalition that I was part of pretty much sold out and really turned to a consultant that wanted messaging that was pretty weak sauce. And is there a way for unions like yours to give our unions a kick in the pants to step up their militancy and not to resort to the usual politics that they do when campaigning, because it doesn't work and it hasn't worked, and we really do need to tax the richest elite, and we have a lot of them in Seattle and we need to stop that.
Well, one thing I would recommend is starting a caucus, even within your own city. Within Chicago, a lot of people don't know this, but CORE, the Caucus Rank and File Educators, we're the ones that took over the union, but we still exist. So we still pressure Karen and pressure the leadership and make sure that the union is moving in the right direction. So if there's something happens like that, if they're trying to sell us out, then the membership would pressure them. So I think you have to keep those forces at bay, because otherwise they're getting pressure from the major unions like AFT or NEA, American Federation of Teachers, and then they could end up caving in. Okay, so you really have to push from below, and it's hard to win things like a millionaire's tax because you have to force rich people to give up their money. All right, so you really have to make that mass movement with the other community members and force them. If there's not enough pressure, obviously they're not going to do it. Yep. Anything else? Okay. Thank you. Oh, last question.
Hi. My name's Lena. I'm currently a university student out in SF State, and I organize with the League of Filipino Students out there, the only U.S. chapter out here. My question to you, as someone, I specifically grew up in a similar system out in San Jose, California, where I saw, people trying to get an education, but instead getting shot. And that was a very commonplace. Teachers didn't care. And I especially saw that within STEM classes. And that hit me really hard as someone who loved that, but was also poor. As someone who plans to jump into that field and be a math or a physics educator, what kind of steps could you say to someone like myself aspiring to do that in the future?
So you mean aspiring to kind of organize against
organize that? And educate.
I mean, one thing as well, which probably I'm sure is happening in your area, is they're not hiring the social workers or counselors, or they're just hiring the police in the schools, which is obviously very ineffective. Okay, so I think also is talking with the parents and organizing that movement to actually push and say, hey, this is what's going to stop this violence, because you need to deal with trauma. We have so much trauma in our schools across the city that if you're not dealing with that, if you have only counselors or social workers who are with students like 10 minutes every 2 weeks, that is not what's going to help that. So I think organizing kind of that movement, but then organizing, if you have other groups that are organizing Civilian Police Accountability Council in your city, I think that's really big. And I know the Chicago Teachers Union, we've paired up with CPAC and these different groups. And let's be honest, we got a lot of heat for that, okay? We got a lot of heat for that because and the police, organized a mass attack really against the Chicago Teachers Union, but we said, we know what's right, and our students are mostly black and brown students, and we're standing up for them, not for police. Okay, so organizing those movements. Thank you.